I give the call to the member for Warringah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was deeply moved yesterday by the attendance of the 1980 Moscow Olympic team in the chamber. And I thank the Prime Minister for acknowledging the incredible sadness and weight the actions of our nation and the politicisation of the participation in the Moscow Olympics had on so many people. Those that went, those that didn't go, but those who were also prevented from going. The lead up to the Moscow Olympics was one of the most difficult periods for the Australian athletes. The Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan disrupted their moment of pride, turning a celebration of athletic competition to a battleground of political tension. Intense pressure from the Australian government, sporting administrators and so many commentators pushing for a boycott of the Games. Australian Olympic Committee voted narrowly to attend. Many sport federations and individual athletes were pressured into withdrawing, sacrificing dreams and years of dedication. Grateful to have the opportunity, others who went were met with incredible treatment by the Australian people and were never celebrated in the way they should have. To be selected on an Olympic team is such an incredible opportunity, dream. It's a culmination of so many years of training and sacrifice. And to have that dream and ambition tarred and marred by so many others, externals, who have no real comprehension of what it's taken to get to that point is incredibly frustrating and sad. And I think it's a moment in Australian history that we need to learn from and make sure we don't repeat. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to speak now, but also yesterday to speak to some of the members of that team who were so wrongly put in the crossfire of politics. The intense public pressure not to compete continues to hurt many of those athletes. There were tears yesterday when people told me of their experience, both going but also not getting the opportunity to go. So I want to acknowledge that devastation for those athletes, what they experience and continue to experience. And I hope with yesterday's moment there was finally a moment to celebrate that entire team, those that went and those that didn't go. I talked to one member who spoke of being part of the women's hockey team. It was going to be historic, first ever women's team to participate, and they were favourites to do very well. And a week before they were due to go, the Federation made the choice that they would not attend, that sport would not participate. She had a uniform, she had the Australian Olympic blazer, the whole kit, and was never able to put it on. She was in tears talking about it. And even yesterday, she wasn't sure whether she should have been there, whether she belonged in that moment of recognition, because we were also pointing out to the lack of welcome home that we gave the athletes that did go and participate. So yesterday was a moment for that whole team to finally feel united and recognised as a whole team, and to thank those that did Australia proud, and in particular to celebrate the incredible sporting achievements as those that competed. There's been a dark shadow that was cast over those Olympic Games, and it should not reduce the success and the efforts of the Australian team. The team came home with 9 medals, 2 gold, 2 silver and 5 bronze. 2 gold were in the swimming for Michelle Ford in women's 800-metre freestyle and the men's 4x100-metre medley. Australia's first gold medals since the Munich Olympics of 1972. This should have been a cause for celebration, and I can't help but wonder what would have been if we had had the full team there. There was no fanfare, no welcome home parade, and our athletes were shunned by sections of the Australian public. That is shameful, because that is the public that is putting upon them their feelings, and it's just not, it just should not happen. As an Olympic athlete myself, I absolutely know the sacrifice and the dedication you have to go through to qualify for the Olympics, what it requires, the perseverance through many highs and lows. the media, and we tend to celebrate the highs, right? When it works, when everything goes well, we see that and the Australian public recognises it. But there are many other dark times, hard times, where you really have to be resilient and to continue to push through. There is immense pressure and dedication to go into, to continue, and all too often on very young people. I had the opportunity to participate in my first Olympics when I was only 17 years of age. And the pressure and the momentousness of that occasion, when I look back on it now at a higher age, I do think back to just how extraordinary it is to be so young and to have such an opportunity. And then when I try and imagine the pressure that was put on those young athletes of that 1980 team, it is just unimaginable, the distress, the pressure, their families, their friends and everyone around them. They should have been celebrated. All should have been celebrated. In the early 20th century, the father of modern Olympic Games, Pierre de Coubertin, wrote that the competition ought to be free from political interference. That purpose is also reflected in the 1958 Olympic Charter. I know that can be difficult at times, especially where nations and human rights are being ignored, and there are calls to try and use the audience of an Olympic Games to highlight that. But we have to think of the Olympic Games as highlighting it for good. It is a platform, an arena where we want to celebrate the best of humanity and all that is possible. It's about where we emphasise unity, neutrality, celebration of athletic excellence beyond borders and ideologies. And there has been a lot of positive diplomacy and participation in the Olympics. Sport has a really strong power to unite us all, to lift us and to reflect the very best of who we are and who we can be. Politicians should not grandstand or stand in the way of athletes pursuing their dreams. I would argue they have very little idea of just what it takes to get there. A couple of us do. Prominent examples of the power of sport to unite and not divide us. Just at the last Olympics, during the Paris Games, the refugee Olympic team made up an independent Olympic participation because they can't compete for their own country. It's so incredibly compelling to see that team compete without the kind of resources and support the national teams get. Athletes compete independently, unable to represent their home countries due to conflict or displacement. But that visibility for that refugee team is incredibly important. And at the Paris 2024 Olympics, Cindy Ngamba, I won't do justice to her name, a refugee from Cameroon, won the refugee team's very first medal, a bronze in the women's middleweight boxing. Now that is historic and important. So we must continue to acknowledge the pain caused when politics interfere with sport. Athletes were let down when their moment of pride and achievement came in 1980, and it was overshadowed by political decisions. We must ensure that never again athletes are asked to sacrifice their dreams for political purposes. So I thank the Prime Minister for yesterday recognising and the Australian Olympic Committee for their efforts in bringing together the 1980 Olympic team and celebrating those athletes in the way that they deserve.